Hello, everyone. I hope that you can hear me. I am waiting to get confirmation that we are live. And so if we would give me one moment to hear whether or not this is live streaming yet through the proper app, will get us going in just a moment. Okay, it says it is live on Zoom. Oh, Robin, thank you. They can hear. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We are so excited to have you all here with us today. Good afternoon. My name is Shireen Malekafzali. For those who do not know me, I use the she, her pronouns. I'm the Chief Equity Officer for the County of San Mateo, and I am really excited to bring you a panel of truly inspiring women of color leaders to share their experiences along their professional journey. Our panel is titled Women of Color Making a Difference, How Did They Get Here? It will not be a surprise to you, but many of women of color lead our county's most important community-based organizations, ensuring services and resources and advocacy support for impacted communities across geographies and issues. But we also know from experience, some of us, and from research that it's not easy for women of color to advance in the workplace. There's a double glass ceiling, oftentimes, one of being a woman, one being a person of color, and there's so many barriers and hurdles along the way to advancing. Our panelists are unquestionably great leaders in our county, making sure the needs and aspirations of our communities are lifted up, standing up programs and resources to meet the community needs, and ensuring the voices of communities of color, often not connected to mainstream channels of influence, are really heard. So today we're going to hear from Lisa Teeler, Executive Director of the Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council, an organization that has fought for health justice for over 25 years in the county and regionally by addressing health disparities in African American, Latinx, and Pacific Islanders across generations. We have Hope Nakamura from Directing Attorney at Legal Aid of San Mateo County, an organization fighting social injustice through civil legal advocacy for people living in poverty and empowering people to overcome the causes and effects of poverty to fully participate in their communities. And Rita Mancera, Executive Director of Puente de las Costas Sur, an organization that walks side by side with South Coast neighbors to support their independence and advocates for health, education, community development, and elevates the community confidence and aspirations. We're so excited to have all of you here today. Thank you all so much. We're going to go through a series of questions and then take questions from the audience. We've already had a great question asked and raised in the online forum that we've added here. But I just want to start off. What we're going to do is do one question and then do a round robin. And we're going to hear first that let's start with you, Lisa, if that's okay. We'd love to hear, as a woman of color, what was most difficult for you on this journey, your professional journey?
Thank you, Shireen. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this panel. My pronouns are she, her. There was so many things when I saw this question, it was really tough to kind of narrow it down to the most difficult. Although there was a couple of things that resonated with me, and that was, one was not always being taken seriously, particularly when you're in a setting when you're one or two of. A lot of times folks they either didn't pay attention, did kind of ignore you. You would say something and then your colleague would say the exact same thing, and people would kind of gravitate towards that. And so I had to kind of learn how to navigate that. And I think that was very difficult because I'm a baby boomer generation, and I was just told, if you work hard, you just move ahead. And that is not always the case. I mean, you're working hard, but you also have to know those nuances and pick up those nuances and who's who's who in the room and who do you need to maybe talk to um, before a meeting. Like I wasn't, those things weren't taught to me. And a lot of times my colleagues, they knew how to do that, but I wasn't taught that. I was just taught, hey, make sure you come to work on time, work hard, just, kind of the kind of generic, but I wasn't taught about the kind of nuances and things that you have to navigate when you're in the workplace. And so that took a while for me to learn that and to see the benefit in it, because I was so busy trying to get stuff done and show how, how good of a colleague I could be and a contributor to the team. And I wasn't really paying attention to how I could navigate my career in addition to working hard.
That sounds very familiar. I'm wondering, Hope, if you have anything you want to add to that about your experience.
Yeah, I think what Lisa said really resonated with me. For me, yeah, with the starting of the journey was the most difficult part, partly because I'm a woman of color, but mostly because I was also the first professional in my family. So we had a lack of role models or mentors. So to Lisa's point, not knowing what you're supposed to do was the biggest challenge, learning the ropes. So I mean, luckily in the university I had gone to was fairly elite, so I could deal with the social cultural aspects of being a professional, but being a lawyer itself, understanding what you're supposed to do, not having any of those professionals in my family. When I went to the East Coast for my first job, I bought a suit, my first suit. And what kind of suit did I bought? A winter white suit, which if you go to court, you see all the people are wearing black and blue and gray suits. So, nobody told me. I thought, oh, a suit, that's professional. That's all I need. So just understanding those kind of nuances, like Lisa mentioned, was really difficult. And trying to figure out how, as a young Asian American lawyer woman, I was going to be taken seriously in a field that was dominated at the time, and still to a large extent by white men who, had generations in their families of professionals. So I think that was really the most difficult, was the starting.
Yeah, that absolutely makes a lot of sense. Rita.
Yes, so I'm very excited to be part of this panel today and to share a little bit about my journey. I still feel that, the question is almost in past tense, but it's like we're still in our journey. I feel that I'm still in this one. And I wanted to share with you, I had really good models, not the models of, having a big professional in the family or a wealthy relative or anything like that, just good models in terms of people that stood up to what they believe. And I think that influenced me forever. And I learned, particularly from my mother, a lot of the resilience and the, building something by herself and not feeling a victim. And I think that just shaped me through my early years. But of course, we have faced some adversities. And what I can share with you is that I speak little about adversities outside of my family, but sometimes it just feels like that you just have so much in your life going on. And I made a point early on that I was not going to let those adversities to shape who I was going to be in life. I own them. I know that that's part of me, but I didn't want it to define particularly what kind of woman I was going to be, because I went through those adversities. And so, so that make it somehow, in a way, for me to be always conscious about who do you want to be in the room somehow. In the early years of my career, and I don't know, I'm still in it, but I think what I faced the most, it was doing extra jobs, things that I remember other people, particularly men, they needed to be doing. And if they face a challenge, they ask like, who wants to take this on? And then I will take it on, and then I'll get it done, And sometimes, and I will talk more about those experiences later, but maybe sometimes by doing that, I was putting myself in the place of the person that is going to do it without asking for anything or asking for a salary or speaking up and saying like, no, this is your job. So a lot of reflection, I think, throughout the journey. And then my current one, and it has been for a few years, is how to balance work and life, because I really enjoy my family and because I really love my job too. But it was harder when my son was younger. Now that he's in middle school, I feel that the pandemic hit my family the right time. Like, he was a middle schooler, he was, taking care of a lot of things. And I just felt very, very privileged that it was not a time where he was little, because I can see people in my team that was really struggling with that. And I did in other years, but that has been a little bit better. But it's still the balance of work life, and it is one of the biggest challenges for me, for sure.
Really appreciate this. It feels like home, to be honest, to be here hearing this. And I hope others also feel that sense of connection, because sometimes we can feel very alone in this. Lisa mentioned kind of, you put your head down and you just work. You're not thinking about how do you network with the kind of people who may not always feel and look like you. It's not part of your culture. Hope mentioned not having examples in your family or community. So you don't have that kind of growing up with that experience. And I really appreciate also, Rita, your point that we're still in it. We're still in it right now. And what does it feel like right now? What are we looking for? And what are we focused on? And I also heard you pointing it out for yourself, but also for your staff. So as a woman of color, you're reflecting what you understood and know, and thinking about that and supporting your staff in it. So I think that's just really important for us to continue to lift up. So I'm wondering, thinking about this experience, these difficult challenges that you had professionally, what would you say is one, certainly feel free to add more than just one, but what are some key lessons learned along your professional journey? And maybe this time we'll start with Hope.
Let's see, I think in reflecting on key lessons, one of it was having confidence in my abilities. I think for a lot of us, people of color especially, and women of color in particular, we doubt ourselves a lot because we're very humble, or women are very self-reflective, I think, naturally. And so it takes a while to gain your stride and your confidence. And I know that there have been a number of TED Talks that talk about faking it until you make it, so that you pretend that you're confident, to exude that confidence when you're speaking to people, but really understanding your own value and what your experience and your talents provide to whatever situation you're in should give you real confidence. But it takes a while for you to realize that you bring a lot to the table, no matter who you are as a woman of color, and that having that inner confidence really affects how others perceive you. At the same time, recognizing that there is real bias out there, unconscious or intentional, that do create those roadblocks, despite the fact that you are a competent, talented person, and not getting your ideas recognized, or not giving you the credit that you deserve because your style might be a little bit more collaborative than, say, the men who are more about the individual and speaking up and taking credit and those sorts of things. Or because you're a woman of color, not wanting to be perceived as like the dragon lady is the Asian stereotype, but there's, the angry Black women, or those kinds of things. If you raise your voice to make a point or argue with a judge, you really have to understand and be able to read the room, understand how those unconscious or conscious biasness might affect their view of you, and always having to understand how to maneuver. And that takes some time, but those are some lessons that I've learned over time.
Thank you, Hope. Rita, do you want to jump in, and then Lisa?
Sure. I have three things I wanted to share about this question of lessons learned. One is ask for help. I have needed support along the way, especially the first day I became the director of Puente. I was very, very scared about certain things, certain parts of the job. So reaching out. And I really appreciate now being sometimes that person for other EDs, especially women who reach out like, do you have 5 minutes? I just want to check this with you, see what you think. Have you gone through something similar? So reach out. 2, do not give up. I mean, my experience with the county in general is very positive, and I talk about the county because it's one of our larger partners, but I've been told no about things. And I know in my core that either I can do that, my agency can do that, or we're advocating for the right thing. And just like, okay, that phone call, we're gonna hang it up and I'm gonna call the next person or the person above, and not giving up just because someone told, because they may have done it for reasons they believe are true, but they may have done it because they have biases as well. And so I think continuing that fight. And the third one is that for many years, we've been told how to behave, what to be, who to be as women. And the times right now is so exciting that I really recommend to you all just to question, all these stereotypes about what to be and what not to be, especially when it comes to race and gender and origin, and try to break down those stereotypes and give ourselves the chance to explore our true identity in the whole ends of it, and lead with that and live with that.
Rita, thank you. Lisa.
Yes, thank you. I also have a couple of points around this, and I think I'll start off with one key lesson that I learned from Dr. Art Levinson, who was the former CEO of Genentech, which I spent about 30 years working at that company. And one of the things he said is, I have an open door policy, and if you come with me with a problem, take the next step and come with a solution. And I that has, ever since I heard him say that over the years, that always resonates with me, is that if you take it that next step, and a lot of times I found myself either not speaking up, or I would see a problem but didn't have the confidence to say, I think this is a problem and I think this is how we can fix it. And so that has been one of my guiding posts, is I always try to, if we're going to talk about a problem, how do we take that next step and come up with a solution? And that has really helped not only resolve a potential problem, but it's also made me stand out as a person that is wanting to get a job done and get a problem taken care of, and not just the person that's providing feedback, but didn't take any time to think about what you could do to resolve it. The second thing is similar to what Hope was saying around confidence, and not being afraid to advocate and promote yourself. Again, I came from the old school, and that was, you didn't do that. You just worked hard and somebody else is going to recognize how great you are. And I would see people say things and say, oh, I've been doing this, or I've been doing that. And I would be like, wow, they really are kind of, boasting themselves. And the next thing you know, they got an assignment, or somebody recognized them because they brought to their attention a project that they were working on. And I always thought that was so like gauche, right? But really, you are your best advocate. And there are ways where you can position yourself and say things so that people can recognize the work that you are doing, or the project you're working on, or whatever it is, and that they can see you in that light as someone that is a go-getter, takes initiative, is interested in different assignments, or maybe a development opportunity, those types of things. And a lot of times I found people who saw the potential in me, but I didn't see the potential in myself. I was my worst enemy. And they were like, oh, you can go ahead and do that. I'm like, oh, no, I don't have all the experience or all the skill sets. And they were like, so what? Go for it. And so that's what I said, I would see people apply for jobs or go for different assignments that didn't have all the boxes checked. And a lot of times they would get those opportunities, or if they didn't get that opportunity this time, then they would consider the next time. And so one of my key lessons is, don't feel like you have to have all the box checked. It's like, if you've got the potential, and you're a go-getter, or this is something that you have a lot of passion and love for, then go for it, regardless.
Wow, such amazing, such sage advice from all of you. And I have so many things running through my head. And one of the things is around how, this concept of the imposter syndrome really holds us back. But it also is, again, blaming us for the problem. We have to change. Whereas there's an issue with the systems that create that challenge. And that's what needs to change. And Lisa, what I hear you saying is you're lifting up people who said, no, you can do it. They gave you that kind of, they kind of had your back. They identified places where you may not have identified for yourself because you might have been worried or you might have not been fully in your power at that time and space. And people called you to that space and you showed yourself, and therefore you shined. So I think that's one thing to think about. I see in the chat, and we can answer this at a later time because I'd love to hear on the panelists, but this idea of what can others be doing, particularly white women and allies and accomplices, what can they be doing? And I hear one thing just right off the bat is sort of lifting up these support opportunities, making sure that in a meeting when you hear someone, a woman of color share a great idea, to lift that up as their idea, point to them and say, could you say more about that? Make sure their voice is in the room. If you don't hear them speaking, ask for them to ask what their thoughts are, invite them in. So I think we'll just, all of us can keep thinking about that as you answer the additional questions. So the next question, and I'm thinking maybe we'll go to Rita. I find myself finding a pattern here for this one is, do you think your personal experience as a woman of color actually helps you better serve your community and be a better leader?
I mean, definitely, yes. A few examples are, it makes me be more aggressive. It's not the word, but I'll use it. More aggressive when fundraising for scholarships, for example, because I know people are going to need those resources. When we plan events and we have to think about, childcare, what time are we going to organize events? It doesn't only impact, I think, the community. My team is part of the community. And so it makes me aware about what are we going to ask for people? Are we going to ask them to come on a weekend? Do we need to be flexible? Like I said earlier, over the pandemic, we had to be flexible with our team, and not just flexible in the way that is like, yeah, that's okay if you don't come. That's okay if you come later. Like really looking at the person and making the person feel like it's really okay. You have to manage these two things this time. And just like, I always try to make sure that they really hear me when I mean that it's gonna be okay that they skip an event, because at the end of the day, they give a lot, and I see it. If someone is going to have some flexibility one time, I know that it's because they already are doing a lot anyways. Other places where I see that it happens, some of them are small. Like, I remember when I would hear things like, oh, we need a man to lift this. And I will correct them. You mean we need a strong person to lift that? It doesn't matter. Sometimes it's those little things. And sometimes it's the big things, it's the more systemic things, is, helping students, especially women, advocating for internships, just reaching high. And like Lisa was saying, sometimes is, in terms of hiring, it to me is a little bit the opposite. In that example is, I look at people who apply, and then I see us making those comments about, oh, these persons didn't check this. And I'm like, well, let's read between the lines. A lot of people, especially women and especially people of color, do not feel confident to put this down, or do not know that this will like boost the resume. So because we have that experience, sometimes then we know, we put ourselves in those situations. And I think that give us a little bit of an insight that is not necessarily on the paper, or is not necessarily on the applications. And so with my team particularly, and I have a leadership team, 100% of women right now, also has helped me to, I hope it come across like that with my team. I don't know for sure, but I've asked them sometimes, like, we're gonna have a check-in and you're going to ask me for a raise. And we never had this conversation, but you're going to ask me for a raise and you're going to get it. But I need you to, to just go through the exercise. And because it's me, I want them to feel like, just say it, like, so that one time when it's not going to be me, you're going to have one round of practice asking for those kind of things. And I really like when I have the opportunity to do some of that mentorship with the women in my team.
Oh, I love that, Rita. That's so great. Lisa, do you have any thoughts on that?
Wow, there's all this stuff like spinning in my head in terms of that question. I feel that as a person of color, particularly women of color, I feel like I have a little bit more empathy towards various communities, not just my own, but in other areas. And so when I feel like I can recognize pain and struggle and triumph from my own experience, and can help others either use their pain or their triumph to move forward and to lift them up. And because of my experience, I know what it's like to be discriminated against. I know what it's like to be brushed aside or ignored. I've experienced that when you don't feel like you count or that you're not good enough because you didn't have all the boxes checked, or just not valued and respected. And so when you come from that place, at least from my own experience, because I know what that's like, I feel like I can relate and show empathy to others who are from my community or not from my community, because the pain is the same. And it makes me, I think, a better person, because I'm a lot more aware of that, and I can listen for it and help where I can, if it's asked for, if it's needed. And share from my experience, share the tools and resources that I used to get through it, to overcome it, to work around it. As a person of color, I feel like we have a lot of power, again, that we don't leverage. And I use the example, people have heard this, you got 4 kids and 3 pork chops. You make a little gravy and pour it over some rice and you got food for everybody. And so we know how to navigate, either it's over, under, sideways, through, because we've had to do that. We've had to use those skills to just get through life. And those are skills that we can use in other settings, in an educational setting or a business setting. We can leverage that because we've had to do it. And I see someone says, yeah, we make it work. We get creative on how we can get things done or resolve a problem or whatever it is that we're trying to do. And that's a skill set that not everybody has. And so we need to leverage that power. I know when I was growing up, in my neighborhood, someone made a certain dish, or someone was, worked at a store where they could get something at a discount, and you kind of like pulled all your resources together to help each other out. And so again, that's another skill set of being able to, if you're in a corporate setting or whatever setting you're in, it's like, oh, well, that person can do this, or that person can, you can navigate, you can kind of work with that and really create something wonderful and impactful because you've been doing it your whole life. And now you get to use it and can show the benefit, the outcome, positive outcomes, and the impact that you can make because of your own personal experience and your own journey.
Before we go to Hope, I just want to, I feel like you said you recognize pain, but I also heard you saying you recognize power. Because you've seen that power, you've seen what it means to be in that space. And I got chills while you were talking about that, because I think of my own personal experience, there's no one more powerful than my mom. And she was a woman of color with an accent, just trying to figure out every single thing for her kids as we were growing up, and constantly undervalued and undercounted. And so I saw that power. And so I can see that in other people. And that's the kind of beauty of having that personal experience. You see the pain, you're able to empathize, but you also see the power, the ingenuity, the strategy, all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I thank you for that, because I saw that every day also with my grandmother. She was from Mexico, came here with hardly anything, and she was a housekeeper. But she didn't, housekeeping when I grew up was, hey, that's how you fed your family. That's how you were able to send your son, my dad, to college. Those are things that, and it was a noble profession. And she would actually dress up, and I would go with her to these different houses that she would clean. And then she'd take off her pearls and her fur, put on her cleaning outfit, and do the job and take those clothes off and put back on her nice clothes. And she was a very proud woman. And she would tell people, yes, I clean houses to support my family and make a living. And she was very proud of that she made an honest living for her family. And so thank you for that. I always think about that she was an incredibly strong woman who defeated so many odds to make a better life for herself and for her family.
That's beautiful. I love that. And she should be proud. She would be so proud.
Thank you.
Hope.
Yeah, I think that's so awesome to hear the stories of strong women in their family. I was also raised by a single mother. Unfortunately, she had a disability which prevented her from really being able to be a strong role model. But that experience and seeing how the system treated women of color who were poor and didn't have access to healthcare really informed how I look at my role as a legal services attorney and how I evaluate how policies that might look objective on their face, but that might actually create a disproportionately unfair outcome. So, you have welfare laws that require people to come into the office and sign these documents and do these welfare to work activities. But what does it mean to be a single mom with 3 children and a disability, having to come to an office during these business hours with no access to a decent running car might actually create hardship for these people to comply with something that is meant to help lift these people out of poverty. So I like to think that my personal experience allows me to have that kind of empathy with clients, even though I'm now in a different position socially, given my education and background now. But I always keep those kinds of stories in mind when I speak with clients and look at policies. And I have that, I try to give clients who are not given that much credibility because they might be a woman of color, that extra boost of credibility, because I know that it's very difficult for them to manage and that they are going to react differently to the system than other people who are more privileged or who grew up in a more privileged background. So definitely my personal experience as a woman of color does affect how I work with the community and gives me an empathy that I wouldn't have otherwise had I grown up in a different space. So.
Absolutely. That kind of personal experience with the system challenges that are coming to you, that enables you to not only just empathize, but strategize too, and figure it out. And I just hear all of you, in some ways, I want to say, I want to lift up the power you all are bringing. You're talking about empathy, and it's so important to use that word because it shows that it's not the soft kind of sweet thing that happens on the side. It's actually sharp and it is powerful, and it is what will cut through the challenges when barriers are ahead of you. And I hear all of you, and I just want to emphasize that for anyone that's hearing it differently than how I'm hearing it. So I just really appreciate all of that. And so, getting to our next question here, you know, you all have already been laying out a lot of really good advice for young women of color. So I'm going to bring these next two questions together to make sure you have a chance to kind of meld them together if you have. One is what advice you would give to women of color, and also what advice you might have to white women who want to be supportive of both young women of color, but also women of color in anywhere in their careers. And this time, I'd love to start with Lisa.
Thank you, Shireen. Well, again, it's funny how as you get, at least when I get older, I channel all the people that have been in my life, particularly family members. And one of the first things I thought about when this question is, first and foremost, don't let anybody take your joy. My dad used to tell me that all the time. You know, I'd come home and I'd be like, oh, this person did this to me and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, why are you letting that person take your joy? Why are you giving them that power? And I remember the first time he said it, I was like, oh, whoa, you're right. You know, I'm giving up my power to this person. And so that's the first, for me, that's the first and foremost thing that I think about. And that sometimes the opportunity may not look like an opportunity, but it can lead to another opportunity. So I often tell people, you know, when they're in their careers or whatever, and they're like, well, I was thinking about doing this, but that doesn't really look like, you know, the direction I want to head. And I said, well, if you go in that direction and it's something that you don't like, at least that's a data point for you. Like, oh, well, that's not something I'm interested in. So I'm a course correct and go this way. But you don't really know unless you actually travel down that path for a minute. So I definitely, that's another bit of advice that I give. And one of the things, and this sounds really corny, but again, it was something that just resonated in my head. Be kind to everyone, because you just never know what might happen, what opportunity or what thing that you didn't even know was going to happen, but you were just kind to that person. You were thoughtful, because opportunities can pop up anywhere. And you just never know where they'll lead. So definitely just, you know, be kind to folks. Not just the folks that you think are going to help you in your career, but just be kind in general. Because I've done that where you plant a seed of kindness, and like years later, it was like a full-blown harvest crop. And you're like, whoa, how did that even happen? So, and then in terms of just paving the way for the next generation, is I'm always, particularly with my younger family members, we talk a lot about life and career and that type of thing. So I'm constantly, whether they want to hear it or not. And then in terms of profession, I've mentored people. I try to challenge folks, you know, to take on those assignments that when I was early in my career, I was like, oh no, I'm not ready for that. I definitely try to look for development opportunities for my staff and for others. And because I see some of them in me saying, you know, oh, I'm not ready, or I don't think I can do that, or, you know, and letting them know that they'll be supported, that they can take risks. And that, you know, failure is also a data point. That, you know, I was always fearful that, you know, if you fail at something, then, you know, you're a failure. It's like, no, that was an opportunity for learning. And you learned from that failure. What did you learn? What mistake? My other grandmother would say, you know, baby, now that you didn't cry about it, what you gonna do about it? And so, you know, you have your pity party for a minute, but then it's like, okay, kind of dust yourself off, wipe up the tears and say, okay, what's the lesson in this that I can learn for the next time? And I try to share that with folks when they're struggling and don't feel that they've been successful on an assignment or project. that is like there's value in the lesson there. So what did you learn, and what you're going to do next for the next opportunity, and know your worth. I think Hope alluded to this, that the confidence in our because we're part of a society that doesn't always provide an atmosphere of knowing your worth. And in fact, there are systems in place that don't want you to know your worth. So it's always it's sort of a check. It's like, what is my worth? So when you're negotiating, a salary, or negotiating a grant, perhaps with a funder, know your worth, know what your organization is. What do you bring to the table? You have, and I'll give you a perfect example. When I first started working as the executive director of BACHAC, a company came to us and said, we're trying to diversify our clinical trial, and we'd love to talk to you about how we could do that. Great. So we met, and so we started, getting into some details. And I said, so what's your budget? And they looked at me like, what do you mean, what's my budget? I said, you're asking my organization to help you diversify this clinical trial. So that means time and resources and people's, particularly for our outreach folks, their reputational capital to go into their community and educate folks and increase people's awareness about this clinical trial. What's that worth for you? And they were like, oh, we didn't, our marketing budget, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, when you work that out, come talk to me. And they were floored. They were like, but you're sort of the community, you're supposed to like doing this because, it's good for your community. And I'm like, yeah, it is good for our community. And if you want us to work with you, you've got to provide some kind of package for that. And so and I, now I'm seeing more of what we're looking for, where it's a partnership. It's, I'm seeing our community folks are consultants to whatever project or problem you're having. So I know when I worked in the corporate, when we engaged a consultant, there was some compensation provided with their service that they were providing, their expertise, their talent, their connections, their resources. And so I expect the same level when you engage our organization, or if you engage our community folks. And, that's just the bottom line. And sometimes that worked and sometimes it didn't. And I was fine for walking away because you're asking me to help you. Right. And as much as I would have loved to participate in this project, if you can't come up with a line item, and we're not talking a lot of money here, then that's a problem that you're not ready to solve. So when you're ready, let me know. So stop there.
Thank you, Lisa. I know, I feel like this is a question we could talk about forever too. I'm going to go to Hope next, and then Rita.
I love the point that you make, Lisa. I think that is the hardest part, is knowing your worth and asking for it. But the advice that I would give young women of color who are early in their professional journeys is to find an organization, an environment where the higher ups value everyone in the organization, and where you have colleagues whom you genuinely like. That's where you're going to thrive as a person. And if you aren't lucky enough or able to find one in the first instance, keep looking. You might have to settle for one job in the first instance, but don't give up, because there are great organizations out there. I have to say, I think most of them are in the nonprofit area, unfortunately, since those tend to be the lower paid areas. And we deserve more, to Lisa's point about knowing our worth, but it's, if your goal is to work in a corporate arena, you could still find people who are allies and people that you like, and you should find them and find a group, either personal or professional, of women and men who are going to support you in that journey. In particular to white women, I would say, create that environment where women of color can thrive and who are valued, and be the ally in the room when a person of color speaks up about a problem or an issue, and support that person. Sometimes it might require you to double check your own biases. We all have them because we know we live in a society that creates these different unconscious biasness. But if you truly value a diverse workforce or an environment, then you have to start with yourself and start with people in your room. So if you see a conflict or an issue, be the first person to speak up and support that person. I think that's the most concrete advice that I can give to people who want to be allies, especially in these days of race, equity, inclusion. We're all going through these trainings talking about how to identify and attack it. Well, it's one thing to identify. It's the hardest part is to really try to dismantle that, and that requires everyone kind of working hard. And sometimes it means swallowing something that we don't exactly want to swallow, but it moves us forward. And so I really encourage people to create that change, as someone famous says, be the change.
I love that. I want to lift up what you're saying about the allies piece, because oftentimes as women in general, we feel like we don't always have our voice fully, but we may, and therefore we may feel small in a room, but to recognize that women of color in particular have additional challenges in front of them. And so to use that positional power you might be in, to use that the space that you're in and find your own voice in order to be able to speak up. And that is always, and create space. And I think that's what's really, that's such an important thing for all of us women to remember, and particularly for white women to sort of think about how to spearhead some of that. Rita, I'd love to hear what you have to share.
Hi, it's great it almost feels like a coffee conversation, and it's really good because we're getting also a lot out of this. One advice is to take care of yourself. When I was listening, I really saw this advice that we're giving you is almost not just coming from us, it's coming from our generations and our mothers and our grandmothers. And it's just a really cool thought of how we're sharing this, and it's not just the 4 women here on the screen. My mom told me you cannot give what you don't have, and she will be funny about this thing. She will say like, I'm gonna eat because if I don't eat, then I cannot feed you. And she always took care of herself, and I feel that I'm very good at it. It's one of my priorities, and I try to, in many different aspects, to take care of myself. So be gentle with yourself as well. There's different things that I wanted to share related to this, particularly because many of you may be afraid about the nonprofit sector. It doesn't have to be the lowest paid sector, and it's changing. And so you that are young, join this fight because it's changing, and we have to continue making it a better space. There's no single reason why nonprofits should pay lower wages, because the work that we do is actually pretty meaningful, and it's something that is needed, and it's something that often covers gaps that exist in our government sector or even in the corporate sector. And so in that instance, if you're not there yet, but when you get to a position of power, share that power, share it with those other women. If you can pay good salaries, pay good salaries. If you need to ask for one, ask for one. But changing that sector is kind of like a job from all of us. The other thing is that, at least I personally don't like when people put us in a box. For example, just Latinx. We're Latinx, and we're also a lot more. Same thing for women. We're very different. And so I think honoring our own diversity and acknowledging that diversity in the way that we work with communities. I love my team. We have people that don't have children, people that have children, people with different aspirations. And so always advocate for not being put on a particular box. I want to repeat something Lisa said, which is about errors. For me, errors are just this fun way to learn and just get better. And I try to bring that sentiment to the organization. And so we often evaluate things because we know we all make mistakes. And I could write a book about the mistakes I've made, including things related to race and gender and things I've done that I'm like, why did I do that? Why did I pay this man more at the first ask? But I've never done that with with a woman. Things, we make tons of mistakes. And I think being humble and sharing that is the way that we all learn. And so these panels are good, but you don't need these panels either. Just reach out to all the amazing women that are surrounding you, that you work with, and share some of these best practices. And we have, I think, people of color, this way of transmitting those stories and learning from those. So doing more of that. And my heart starts going a little faster about this part because I always feel that I'm going to say this the wrong way, but I think our white allies can volunteer, can help facilitate the environment. You can share about organizations of color with your networks. You can partner with organizations of color, but I still feel that the solution to this is not coming from you. It's coming from ourselves, from the people and the women of color. If we want to have a sustainable change, it is up to us. So you can do a part and see, imagine the reaction you already have on me speaking to the white people in the room, but this is something that we live all the time. And so there's things you can do, but to make it a change that is gonna last for a long time, it has to come within us. So when women of color approaches the room, when they lead, we just need to let them lead and let them do that, because it's the way that the changes is not going to be something temporary, but something transcendental for the women, but also for the communities.
Rita, thank you for your honesty on that part about just what does it even feel like to respond to a question that was asked of you, by white women. I think that's really deep and speaks to a lot of power dynamics that sometimes we're not even aware of coming from these amazing leaders that I'm looking at right now. But thank you for sharing that, and also for sharing all of you for sharing that beautiful advice. And it makes me feel like sharing that one of the things that I think is so important for young women of color is actually to sit in the things that often you felt made you different and made you small. And the things that people, whether it was on the playground where people were calling you names or not talking with you, or the things that you saw in media that, the stereotypes that you were scared to feed into. So you acted a certain type of way and policed yourself. Like, really sit with those things that society told you made you small and actually see it as your superpower. I've heard this over and over from this beautiful panel in front of me right now, which is that they tapped into those personal experiences for a source of power, for a source of wisdom. I mean, Rita, you're giving me goosebumps now because you called on our ancestors. And you said, we're not speaking just ourselves. We're speaking from generations and generations who have fought, who are the reasons that we're even here. Mm-hmm. And, we've all been calling on our mothers, on our family members, this wisdom is not something, is just profound. And you have that all in you. But you have to hold it. You have to nurture it. You actually have to love it and give it compassion and then let it flourish, because that's where so much wisdom lies. That's where so much empathy lies. That's where so many of the tools of that survival and that wisdom and that depth that's just layered comes from. And I just want to we have 2 minutes. Is there any I know this is just 2 minutes and there's so much to be said here, but is there any final words that any of you feel called to share?
If I can just jump in, when we were talking about allies, one of the things that I thought about is checking yourself in terms of your own bias and and we all have the baggage. It's sort of like, you put on the mask of oxygen first before you can help others. You need to look and examine and go through your own process. And then, because then that makes you more self-aware. And then you can go out and do whatever it is you do. And sometimes it's just asking a question like, who's not in the room? Who's going to benefit from this and who's going to be at a disadvantage? So it doesn't always have to be like, oh, I'm going to volunteer for the NAACP or, you know, all this stuff. I mean, not to knock any of that. That's awesome and it's great. And if you feel, you know, the passion to do that, you know, I'm behind that. But, you know, a small step is just like, hey, what are some things that I'm struggling with? And kind of getting in tune with your own self about what your issues are around race. And then, you know, kind of go through that self-examination, and there's tools and resources that are out there to do that. And then try to help someone else, or even ask the person, how can I be helpful to you? I mean, I think Rita just made that point. It's like, you know, let us lead, and then ask us how we can help you lead, and not, you know, just being in a place where you're not focused so much on yourself, but you've done the work, but then now you're able to help others, and in whatever shape, form, and fashion that might be, whatever the spectrum is. So I just feel like I needed to say that.
Thank you for that, Lisa. And I know I'm just going to share that it is 4 o'clock and some people might need to run off. Feel free to do that. And we so appreciate you joining. And I would love to continue, and we'll stay just for a few minutes if Rita and Hope have anything they want to share to close us out.
Just thank you for having us today, and for the people that came, and reach out if you ever want to just brainstorm, check in, share something. It's just really helpful. I find it helpful for me, and I'm really glad when other people can count on me too.
I just wanted to thank the other panelists and Shireen. I think everyone's stories and words of wisdom was really heartfelt, and I really appreciate being part of this moment. I know there are probably a million stories out in the audience, and would love to continue the conversation as somebody suggested in the chat. So I hope there are other opportunities for us to meet and support each other. So thanks.
Thank you. I just deep appreciation to all the 3 of you for making time, for all of you who are still on the call, hanging on after the 4 p.m. with all the wisdom that you shared and all the heart that you brought to this. And I do hope that we get a chance to continue the conversation. And I just feel so blessed to be in a place that has leadership like all of you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.